Hello everyone, and today we're going to be talking about the Dark Magician, but not just any old Dark Magician deck. We're talking about branded Fusion Dark Magician. I know people have been asking me for this in the comments, and as well I've been trying to sort of figure it out myself. A lot of people are treating this as if it's a way to make the Dark Magician competitively viable, and it does add another dimension to the deck. I think it is fair to say that this version of the deck is at least as strong, if not stronger, than the original version, the sort of pure version, you know, the play DP and everything like that. So there is a good bit to consider here when it comes to this. Now, what is the primary synergy when it comes to the branded Fusion and the Dark Magician? Well, it's primarily around the summoning of your Dark Magician, the Dragon Knight. So Dark Magician, the Dragon Knight is a fusion of Dark Magician and a Dragon monster. So long as he's on the field or in the graveyard, his name becomes Dark Magician, and as long as he's face up, your spells and traps cannot be targeted by or destroyed by card effects. Now that, of course, is extremely powerful in conjunction with your Dark Magical Circle, which basically says that every time a Dark Magician is summoned, you get to banish a card on your opponent's field, and of course this card becomes Dark Magician. And your Eternal Soul, which means all of your Dark Magicians are unaffected by all card effects, and you can resurrect one every single turn from your graveyard or your hand. Now this card can be resurrected by Eternal Soul every single turn, and Eternal Soul thus makes it unaffected. So it's basically like a bit of a lock. Dark Magician the Dragon Knight protects your back row, and Eternal Soul protects your Dark Magician the Dragon Knight. So it's very difficult to sort of get rid of, apart from the fact it's 3000 attack. You can just sort of slap him around a wee bit. But that's the idea behind it. How does branded Fusion add to that? Well, it makes the Dragon Knight significantly more consistent, because you activate your branded Fusion, and instead of sending a Tragedy, you would instead send the Dark Magician as well as your Albaz to the graveyard to fusion summon out your Lobelion the Searing Dragon. Discard a card to use your Lobelion the Searing Dragon's effect to fuse him and the Dark Magician that's now in your graveyard back into the deck to fusion summon out the Dragon Knight. So it makes the Dragon Knight significantly more consistent. Now, is that enough to make this deck viable? In casual play, yes, this deck functions, it moves sort of smoothly, it does its thing, it does have a lot of potential play, which is fine. It's just too inconsistent to be seen at a competitive level, because your deck is now somewhat focused around the branded Fusion aspect of it. You're less consistently going to have access to both Circle and Soul, which means that, yeah, your Dragon Knight comes out more consistently, but the actual cards that make him useful do not appear nearly as often as they used to, and you usually have one or the other. Very rarely would you have both. So that is definitely a factor. Now, see, this deck, this sort of idea was not originally designed around Dark Magician and Dragon Knight. It was designed around none other than the Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, which of course would have made this significantly more powerful. This card is still being played in branded versions in the TCG, where they would just take a single Dark Magician in the Odespia branded deck, and then they would fuse the exact same combo I just said, the branded Fusion, Lobelion, send Dark Magician and Albaz, shuffle either Albaz and the Dark Magician or Lobelion and the Dark Magician back into the deck to summon out the Dragoon, which is a significantly more impactful card, which actually makes that combo by itself worth it and does not require the support of additional cards around it. So the entire idea and concept of this deck was built around a different card. Which of course explains why it doesn't feel as impactful as it should. So again, this deck, the branded Dark Magician deck, I don't think this is going to be the way to play it anyway. I think this version of it is built more heavily around trying to get the Dark Magician the Dragon Knight. For branded Dark Magician to be powerful, we need Dragoon, and it's more than likely simply going to take the shape of a branded Despia deck with a Dark Magician teched in. So branded Dark Magician itself, yes, once Dragoon, if Dragoon is unbanned, this becomes a lot more powerful, really does. But we'll just have to see what happens when that day comes. So I think this is a fantastic deck for casual play, not so much for competitive play at the moment. Again, you can tell me down below if I'm wrong, but I just don't see it. But again, if you like what you're seeing and you want to see more, feel free to subscribe, and again, like the video as well if you want to see things like this in the future. We do try to make things as competitive as we possibly can here. I'm not going to lie to you about how good or bad a deck is. I want you to build this. If you do decide to build this, I want you to know that it's going to be an uphill battle for ranked, but if you want to just have fun and casual or play with your friends, you can't beat a bit of Dark Magician. It's a really fun deck to play around with, absolutely. I do think the original version is more fun, but Branded Fusion bringing Mirror Jade and everything into this deck also gives this a bit more of a competitive edge, so I get it. Either way, if you like what you're seeing, subscribe, comment down below if you have any suggestions on what you would do to fix it, or any other decks you want me to cover. Let's get into the gameplay. Already getting into game 1 here. I feel like I should clarify that all of these games we're seeing are of course ranked. Now our opponent's going to open up with White Stingray and the Abyss Shark here, looking like they're playing a Water Exceed deck of some kind. They're going to go for their lifeless Leafish, and then they're going to link summon into Marincess Coral Anemone, so it's a bit of a different take on it. They're not going to go for World Legacy Succession, which is basically Monster Reborn, except you summon it to a zonal link monster points to, resurrecting the super ancient deep sea whatever. So this guy is pretty nuts. You discard a card to special summon as many level 4 or lower fish monsters from your deck as possible. So he's crazy. He's going to discard 1, summon a Fishborg Launcher and 2 Oyster Meisters. This is just a level 1 tuner that can resurrect itself. These guys summon a token when they go to the grave, so he's going to synchro summon here into the Ravenous Crocodile. Crocodil's draw 2, and his Oyster Meister will grab him a token. Yep, there's the draw 2, pot agreed. Then you've got the Oyster Meister token coming on now. Fishborg Launcher resurrects itself. 1+1+7 gives you another 9, which in this case is Trishula. Luckily for us, True King of All Calamities is in fact banned, but they do snipe a Soul Servant from our hand, which we're fine with. Then they're going to resurrect the White Stingray, then synchro summon using it into the Deep Sea Prima Donna. Now, Prima Donna has an interesting effect where you can basically return a banished card in your opponent, one of your opponent's banished cards, to their hand to special summon here, in this case the Atlantean Dragoon. So we get our Soul Servant back, which is pretty interesting. A real nice combo with the Trishula. Gonna basically return 3 back into the deck here, draw 1 off of their card there. Then they're going to link summon into the Bubble Reef and pass back to us. So this field here, our opponent did a bit of, looping, a lot of drawing cards and such like that, but they don't have a ton of power on their field here, so we're pretty confident about this game and the way it's looking. They're going to banish 1 from the graveyard to draw 1, and they boost up to 3200. Discard a card to summon the Illusion Magician to search our deck for the Dark Magician. Magician Souls then will send the Dark Magician Girl from the deck to the graveyard to summon itself, discarding the Soul Servant to draw 1. We get our Dark Magical Circle, which will now activate. By banishing the Soul Servant from the graveyard, we draw 1, and we draw into Alibur, so we're getting really lucky here off of our draws. Going for Branded Fusion now, we're going to send Alibur and the Tragedy to the graveyard. We don't need to send the Dark Magician since we already have him. We're going to discard the Dark Magician to activate the effect of Lobelion, as well as using Tragedy to search our deck for a Despian monster. So we're going to grab Ad Libitum. The thing about this strategy is that 90% of the time, Mirror Jade is just stronger than the Dragon Knight, which is unfortunate, but it just is. He's going to pop our Dark Magical Circle here, so that's part of why we didn't really want to go into anything else. Dark Magical Circle is now gone. Mirror Jade banishes the monster there. You could obviously have made the argument that the Dark Magician would have been stronger there, the Dragon Knight. Absolutely, I can see where you're coming from. But Mirror Jade setting up that Branded in Red follow-up is why I wanted to go for that play. So we're going to just start swinging in, taking out his monsters. The Nimble Sunfish, of course, basically get the Foolish Burial whenever they're destroyed. Branded in Red then, it's going to resurrect the Despian Tragedy, then Fusion Summon using 2 in the hand, 1 on the field, into the Guardian Chimera. Chimera, pop 1, draw 2, and then we've got the Ad Libitum, which is going to resurrect the Tragedy for use later. Again, could have used the Mirror Jade, small misplay, but nothing ultimately too detrimental. Pop the Ravenous Crocodile, take out Trishula, and then basically pass turn. But our opponent, yeah, we completely dismantled everything our opponent had. They decided there was no real comeback from that, and they pass it back to us as a win. So again, fair enough. There was a couple of things in that game you could have done differently. You could have summoned out the Dragon Knight to protect your Dark Magical Circle and your Eternal Soul and set up that whole combo, which would have been neat. But ultimately, again, the impact from the Mirror Jade into the Guardian Chimera was simply much more significant, which is why we went for that. But yes, that's pretty much it for game number 1. Not very much to talk about there. Let's get into game number 2. Alrighty, getting into game 2 here. Now this game's going to be a bit of a slow burner here. You can see our opponent doesn't have any plays on their first turn. Which, again, normally I wouldn't show this type of game, but it does sort of scale up from here. Dark Magical Circle is going to check the top 3 cards of our deck for a Dark Magician or related card, which it's going to find because Soul Servant will stack a card on top of the deck. So we're going to grab our Dark Magician, meaning we have a guaranteed target for our Eternal Soul. So we're feeling pretty confident here. We've got a decent enough setup. This is the pure Dark Magician setup, and this is why the pure Dark Magician setup doesn't work. So we get Feather Dustered away. He's going to go to Vainer of the Herald. We're going to negate that off of the Effect Veiler. We don't want to be dealing with that nonsense. It doesn't tell us too much about what deck they're playing, but we know it's in some way ritual focused. Now they're going to link summon now into Salamangreat Almirage, and then into the Secure Gardener. So this tells us a little bit more. So they're very clearly playing a deck that wants something from the extra deck on the field, like Dogmatika. So Dogmatika is very interesting. They're very anti-extra deck, but at the same time, for their abilities to function, you can also have an extra deck monster of your own. Send 2 cards from both extra decks to the graveyard. They send the Herald of the Arclight, which would search for a ritual card for them. We don't want that to happen because we know how powerful their ritual monsters are, so we're going to negate that. They're going to set 3 and pass it back to us. Now we only have 1 card in our hand. They're going to summon Ecclesia at the end of the turn, which is going to search for their ritual spell. Albion, which we sent to our graveyard, is going to search our deck for Branded Fusion. So we've got some branded versus Dogmatika action going on here. We top deck into Magician's Rod, which is amazing. We're going to search our deck for a Dark Magical Circle here. Dark Magical Circle activates and adds Soul Servant from our deck to our hand. Now we're going to go Branded Fusion here, and small, I don't know if I would say misplay, but what we could have done differently here is we're going to discard Soul Servant off of Lebellion to activate it. What we should have done is discarded the Dark Magician, because we would have been able to draw 2 cards off of Soul Servant instead of just 1. Not a massive difference really. Again, we were sort of counting on them maybe not having something like Impermanence, but with 3 face down cards, you sort of take what you have to get. They're going to use Dogmatika Punishment to send the Elder Entity to the graveyard to basically pop both of our monsters, and then we have no choice but to end our turn. So at this point we sort of figure that this is going to be a very uphill battle. Their Maximus again send 2 from extra deck to the graveyard, and they're going to go for the White Knight of Dogmatika, and their Cyframe Lord Omega is also going to add Titaniclap back to their deck. So that's a very interesting combo where Omega can help them recycle their monsters from their graveyard, their extra deck monsters, in order to gain more advantage of them later. They're going to Ritual Summon out their White Knight, and they're going to swing in here for some damage, big damage. Basically what, 3k? Yeah. So not the greatest thing in the world. Again, we are behind, but at the same time, we're not losing outright. He's going to search his deck for Floridas, which is going to be a problem. We top deck in the Crossout Designator, which does help us here because Branded Fusion's about to come out. They ash it, and now we've got the Crossout Designator in our hand to stop the ash. So again, another phenomenal top deck. That's part of why I wanted to show this. Like, we're getting absolute heart of the cards here. Getting every single card we need off the top of our deck to try and make any sort of play. Send 2 from deck to graveyard to summon out Lebellion once again. Discard our Dark Magician to fusion summon Fervor. And the Tragedy will also activate then to search our deck for a card. They're going to go for the White Knight of Dogmatika's effect here, as well as their Floridas in their hand. Fleur-Delius, or whatever its name is. Gonna summon out the Fleur-Delius. That's gonna negate our monster. Well, unfortunately, no fusion for us. They're gonna send a card from both extra decks to the graveyard and boost up its attack points to 2000. We do grab the Alibur, but our Lebellion does get negated. Banish Soul Servant to draw 2. We normal summon out Alibur here. We're going to add Branded in Red from our deck to our hand. Branded in Red then is going to help us fusion summon by adding Alibaz back to our hand. Then fuse 3 to go into the Guardian Chimera. Guardian Chimera, of course, being a very powerful card. It's going to allow us to pop 2 cards and draw 1, but they do have the Chaos Scepter Blast. Chaos Scepter Blast banishing our Chimera, unfortunately, but we still get to resolve its effect. Pop the White Knight and the Maximus. Special summon out the Apprentice Illusion Magician, set 1 and take out the Ecclesia. We just want to reduce the number of monsters he has on his field that he can attack with, because the Fleur-Delius or whatever, when it attacks, all of your Dogmatika get permanently 500 bigger. So we don't really want to be dealing with that. Maximus goes to send another 2 cards from the extra deck to the graveyard. We're sort of running out of steam here, so we need to stop that Maximus from resolving. So we're going to negate it, which suits us, but the Floridas, of course, can still attack Fleur-Delius, whatever its name is. Takes out our Apprentice Illusion Magician. Secure Gardener hits us directly for 1000, so they're just gradually whittling us down which is unfortunate. We really need something big here. We top deck into Secrets of Dark Magic, but we do have Tragedy in the grave, which is going to get branded in red back to us. We're not completely out of the game just yet. We of course don't have tons of plays, but we should be able to do something. The only issue is that we're running out of targets for fusion. But we do have the branded in red, so we're not completely out of the game yet. Ecclesia is going to summon itself back out to the field here, searching its deck for the White Relic of Dogmatica, their second ritual monster, which they're now going to summon. We're going to preemptively use branded in red because that ritual monster is only going to be more of a problem as long as we have extra deck monsters on the field. Add back Albaz to the hand and then summon out Dark Magician, the Dragon Knight to the field. 2500k, 2500 defense. And Dark Magical Circle here, on summon, Dark Magical Circle is going to activate, and we're going to banish that Fleur-Delius, which means that he basically cannot swing over us, and the White Relic does not get its attack boost from its summon, which is great. This puts us finally in a position where we can start inflicting some kind of damage. So we switch our Dark Magician to attack mode, discard one to summon out, use our Illusion Magician to take out Secure Gardener, then we take out the White Relic. That's going to reduce the number of effects he can use, basically, of the monsters on his hand, but we still have an extra deck monster on our field, which is going to pose a problem. Maximus, send 2 from each extra deck to the graveyard. Again, really running out of gas when it comes to the extra deck. The Fleur-Delius, another one in his hand already. The Fossil Skull Warrior with Fing from the graveyard, banished to pop. He's going to take out the Apprentice Illusion Magician, boosting up his field to 25 and 2k, and that's game. Unfortunate. It was a sort of big back and forth duel. There wasn't very many turns in that game where we didn't draw the exact card we needed. Most of those turns we got exactly what we could have asked for, and we still managed to lose against a deck that isn't even really meta relevant. Dogmatica is really cool. I love Dogmatica, especially the new ritual variant that people are playing. I really need to give it a try. But it's just a case of the branded Dark Magician not having the gas in its tank to sort of take it out. It's 1 or 2 interruptions a turn away from being useless, which I know a lot of decks are, but again, it's just painful to see. But yeah, that's game number 2, so it is it was a very engaging duel, very back and forth. But having said that, let's get into game number 3. Already getting into game 3 here. Again, we have a pretty solid hand. Magician Soul, sending Dark Magician Girl from the deck to the graveyard to summon her out to the field. Then we're going to go for Branded Fusion. Probably could have chosen the original Dark Magician there, but we have secrets in our hand to be used. We're going to use Lobelion now, discard the Dark Magician to summon, to boost up the Dark Magician Girl. Tragedy, then searching our deck for a Despian monster. But they've got the Imperm, and that's the thing about the Branded Engine. The Branded Engine is so vulnerable to interruption that unless you're playing a dedicated deck around it, it does get somewhat difficult to resolve your effects. So we're unfortunately forced to simply play the Dark Magician Girl. This could be a good reason to play Dark Magician Girl, the Dragon Knight. That is definitely situations like this that would be useful. Our opponent's going to go for the Adventure Engine, which we've seen time and time again, which I haven't been seeing a lot of recently since the Water Enchantress was limited to 1, which is cool. And they sent a Tiny Vishuda to the graveyard, which could imply that this might be the return of the Adventure Tinny cards. So we're going to go for secrets here, and then our opponent's going to go Call by the Grave to banish from the graveyard the Faller of Albaz, which was an interesting decision. And we're going to fuse 3 monsters in our hand here to go into the Guardian Chimera. Remember, the Secrets of Dark Magic doesn't restrict what kind of monsters you can summon, as long as you're using one of the Dark Magicians as a fusion material. So the Fatal Adventure here is going to try searching his deck. Guardian Chimera activates, Ad Libitum activates. We're going to use the Guardian Chimera to basically pop the Adventure token, which prevents them from using the equip spell that they just added to their hand, and it also removes the negate associated with the Griffin Rider. They normal summon out their Adhara, and then they link summon now into Monk of the Tinny. They return a Guardian Chimera back to our extra deck, and then the Dracoback actually works not just with the Adventure token, but any normal monster. So that could be their logic behind using Tinny monsters in this version of it. Very interesting. Dracoback, of course, being a real problem. They're going to add the Vishuda back to their hand, I'm assuming for later. Then they're going to swing in, take out our Despian Tragedy, and then hit us for 2k directly. So not the greatest turn for us. They did sort of dismantle us a little bit, but we're not out of plays just yet. We have double Call by the Grave. Despian Tragedy banishes itself to basically set a Branded Fusion back to our field. We're going to discard 1 to summon the Apprentice Illusion Magician to grab the Dark Magician to our hand. Set 1. Crash into the Griffin Rider and then pass. We know that the Dracoback would simply add return our monster back to our hand. We couldn't destroy by battle. We might as well take out the big threat. We're going to bounce the Brand Diffusion back to our hand, which, okay, we didn't really care about. Again, the Faithful Adventure is going to be activating here. They get their token, they grab their Rite of Aramasir, their Water Enchantress. The Vishuda is going to return the other face down card back to our hand, but we're going to use that opportunity to activate it to get rid of the Griffin Rider on the off chance that they try to draw into another one. Again, it's unlikely, but I would rather use it than lose it. The only card in their hand was the Water Enchantress, which we weren't going to be able to hit with Call at the Grave anyway, because they're going to summon it out to the field here. Then they're going to swing 2k to the face, 1000 and 1500. So again, it's not looking great, but we're not out of it here. We still have a few cards at our disposal. So Ash Blossom comes out here, and yeah, that was it. Unfortunate draw. We really needed something to play here. Now, unfortunately for the Branded Fusion, we didn't have any targets left in our deck. We didn't have any Fallen of Albaz remaining for us to use as material. Is that an argument for playing 3? No. It very, very rarely happens, and it only ever happens whenever your actual branded plays get interrupted. Again, this is just one of those circumstances where the deck needs to function in a very specific way if it's going to work. And if that gets interrupted, it's very difficult for it to come back. More difficult even than the original variants of Dark Magician, which usually at least have some sort of counterplay and comeback potential. While still difficult because most of its combos require 2 or 3 cards, it still has that potential, whereas this deck simply lacks it. But yes, again, don't like showing multiple losses in the video, but I don't want to deceive people into thinking that this deck is something that it isn't. But we're going to go into the deck profile now, and we're going to talk in more detail about exactly what I mean. Alrighty, so having a look at the deck profile, first of all, we're going to remove the fluff, basically all the hand traps, double Maxi, double Ash Blossom. We've got double Call by the Grave, Cross-Out Designator, triple Infinite Impermanence, and I think that's pretty much it. So the core of your deck is actually quite sizable, sitting at 30 cards. 10 hand traps isn't bad. I would like a couple more if possible, but ultimately this is somewhat decent. And this deck then is basically split down the middle into 2 separate engines. You've got your Dark Magician and you've got your Despia. So we're going to start with the Dark Magician. Of course, double copies of Dark Magician. You can play it at 3. I think 3 is a little bit bricky, and I'm not crafting a third one for that reason. I don't think 3 is necessary at all. I think 2 is fine. Magician Souls, one of the best starters in the deck for the core Dark Magician stuff. Send either your Dark Magician or your Dark Magician Girl to the graveyard to either summon one of the 2 from the grave or summon itself from the hand, and while on the field you can discard up to 2 spells or traps or send them from field to graveyard and draw that number of cards. So Magician Souls is very, very good. It generates a lot of card advantage, more easily puts your Dark Magician in the graveyard to be revived from Eternal Soul, makes your Soul Servant draw cards more consistently. So Magician Souls is very powerful. We've got Magician's Rod, which searches your deck for any Dark Magician related spell or trap card. So it'll search your deck for Dark Magical Circle, for your Magician Salvation, Secrets, Eternal Soul, Soul Servant, anything like that, and just sort of depends on what you need. You saw in the video we were mainly searching for Dark Magical Circle. A lot of these other cards don't really do an awful lot by themselves in this version of the deck unless you have Dark Magical Circle up. Again, summoning the Dragon Knight is neat, but it doesn't do very much unless you have a circle. So it's just trying to actually enable the Dark Magician aspect of it. Not the most good, but so this is basically your best normal summon in the deck, and it's not even all that close. You have the Dark Magician Girl, who is here for her name and nothing else. The Apprentice Illusion Magician, discard 1 to special summon her from the hand and search for a Dark Magician when you do. So she is better for going into link plays whenever you don't open up your branded combos. Again, this card isn't necessarily too important to the deck. I wouldn't say she's core. She does make Dark Magician more consistent, and she does make the Predaplant Vertanaconda more consistent. So I am a big fan of this card, but it's definitely not necessary if you decide to cut it. Magician Salvation, its main use is that when it's activated, you grab an Eternal Soul from your deck, which is your trap card, and you play it face down, which is basically the only thing this card is useful for. It also has another effect, whereas if you summon one of the Dark Magicians and you have the other one in your graveyard, you can summon the other one, which is like cool. Now you have 2 vanilla beaters instead of 1. Like, that's not that big of a deal. Usually then this card is going to get sent to the graveyard by activating your Magician Souls to send it there to draw a card. Dark Magical Circle. When it's activated, check the 3 cards on top of your deck. If there's a Dark Magician or a related spell or trap card among them, add it to your hand. Otherwise, return them in any order you see fit. So that's very effective whenever you're combining it with all of your different draw cards, because you can stack your deck and you'll know exactly what you're drawing into. Its second and main effect is whenever you summon a Dark Magician, being the Dark Magician or the Dragon Knight, you get to choose a card in your opponent's field and banish it once per turn. And as a continuous spell card, it can be used on both your turn and your opponent's turn, which is where the Eternal Soul comes in. Soul Servant, two main effects. Number one, place on top of your deck a Dark Magician or Dark Magician related card, basically. Place it top of the deck, pretty much it. And second effect, you can banish it from the graveyard and draw cards equal to the number of Dark Magician Girls, or Palladium monsters with different names in your graveyard. So you'll usually, if you have both of these guys in the graveyard, you'll draw two. Pretty simple. Secret to Dark Magic is a quick play fusion spell. Really straightforward. It just fusion summons. You have to use at least one of the two cards in the fusion, but apart from that, it's just a fusion spell. Branded in red. Everyone knows what Branded in red does. Eternal Soul then is part of the final and most important part of the Dark Magician package. Resurrect the Dark Magician from your hand or graveyard every single turn, and all of your Dark Magicians are unaffected by any card effect. So that is amazing. It does turn your Dark Magician Dragon Knight into your boss monster, makes Dark Magician itself a bit of a boss monster when used in combination with Dark Magical Circle. Otherwise, it just gives you an unaffected beater for 3k or 2500, which is still, you know, it's kind of fun, it's kind of good. But you really need your circle to be making the most advantage of this. The downside to Eternal Soul is, as much as it's your best card, it's also your greatest weakness, because when this card is sent removed from the field, basically, all of your monsters get destroyed, which makes it a bit of an easy target. So all they need to do is essentially get rid of the Dark Magician, the Dragon Knight, and then chain some sort of destruction to its activation, which is really easy to do. So card, it has its weaknesses, of course, obviously. And that's the Dark Magician aspect of it. That's where most of the power and sort of consistency sort of comes from whenever you're talking about your circle and management. The branded engine then is really straightforward. We're playing a single Tragedy, which when sent to the graveyard will search your deck for another Despia monster, and it can banish itself from the graveyard to set one of your branded spells and traps from the graveyard. So Tragedy is a consistency card. You've got the double Fallen of Albaz, which is here for its name. Aliber, on summon, search your deck for another Despia card, a Despia monster. A branded spell or trap card. It's ad libitum then. Whenever it's used in a fusion summon from your hand or field or graveyard, you can basically resurrect one of your level 8 or higher fusion monsters, or one of your Despian monsters if you don't have a level 8 or higher fusion. So ad libitum is going to be part of your core combo with the Branded in red, which we've talked about time and time again. I'm not going to go over it again here tonight, because it is something that is ubiquitous within the Diamond metagame. So you've seen it enough times yourself, and if you don't know what it is, you can watch my dedicated Branded video, which covers it in much more detail. Branded Fusion, of course, being one of your main starters. Fusion summon using monsters in your deck as material. That's how you're going to be putting Albaz and your Dark Magician into the graveyard from the deck. Although normally fusing Albaz and Tragedy is simply better. The Branded in red alongside Mirror Jade, I think, is just a stronger combination than the Dragon Knight and the Eternal Soul and Circle, because again, even with Soul, Circle and the Knight, I would still rather have the Branded in red, to be perfectly honest. This is powerful and all, I get it. If this was Dragoon, sign me up, but it's not, so what are you gonna do? Then you've got the Branded in red. Target a Despia or Fallen of Albaz in your graveyard, add it back to your hand, and then quick play fusion summon by banishing from your field or hand. This is how you're going to be summoning out things like your Guardian Chimera, which for some reason I have taken out of the deck. That was some sort of mistake. I think it was in place of Starving Venom, but your Guardian Chimera is essentially your big target for this, because it'll pop cards in your opponent's field equal to the number of cards that you used on the field as fusion materials. So if you use 2 monsters on your field as materials, pop 2 cards, and then you draw 1, because the one material will be left in your hand. Again, we've covered that combo off way more in depth in our Branded Despia video, so if you want to know more, I'd recommend watching that. But yes, this is the deck. Is it any good? It is definitely good. It works. It does exactly what you would expect it to do, but it does not function in a competitive environment. I don't think I could confidently say it is better objectively than the pure Dark Magician variants. I think it's good and it does something different. It has more comeback potential with the Branded Fusion, but in terms of outright power, I just don't know if it's as good as even just the pure Dark Magician version or the pure Despia branded. I think this is just a love child between the two. It's definitely not nearly as good as Despia branded. Despia branded is way better, but I can't even confidently say it's better than just Dark Magician, to be honest. It would be if we had Dragoon. 100%, million percent, absolutely. If we had Dragoon, it would be better objectively, no questions asked. It would just be more consistent, it would be more powerful, but we don't. So what are you gonna do? We just don't have it. Yes, that's my 2 cents on the issue. Probably an unpopular opinion, I get it. I love Dark Magician. I'm okay with the branded stuff. I don't despise it, I don't hate it, but at the same time I'm not in love with it. But I do love some Dark Magician, so it does pain me to have to admit it, that it's just not that good in terms of a competitive setting. But in a casual play or playing with your friends, absolutely go for it. It'll crush, it'll do the job, and you're not going to be having any problems on that front. So again, if you like what you're seeing here, again, on in some cases brutally honest competitive reviews, I'm not going to try and sell you something that isn't in front of you. There's a lot of URs in this deck to be crafting it just to get it and think to yourself, well, that person lied to me, I'm not here for that. A lot of people are on YouTube are already lying to you about that. I'll leave that to them. I'm going to stay here. I'm going to be doing honest reviews of all of these decks. So if you like that, you want to get some honest competitive feedback about these things, subscribe, leave a comment down below for what you want to be seeing. And if you wouldn't mind, just like the video. I've realized it's not something we've been promoting an awful lot, but it does help out and all. I didn't really notice how much it helped. It does help if you would like the video. But yes, that's pretty much my 2 cents on the issue, and I'll see you all in the next one.